Many of you probably know that G2A, this gray marketplace for digital games, is no stranger to controversy due to accusations that G2A essentially enables fraudulent purchases and selling of games that hurts a lot of indie developers who have to deal with customer service for people wondering why their game key isn't working all of a sudden, or who have to issue chargebacks which cost developers money. And indie developers in particular suffer because they're financially constrained compared to a lot of the major AAA publishers who can kind of stave off a handful of fraudulent purchases. The same cannot be said for indie developers who are legitimately harmed by this company and have tried to get their games delisted from G2A, but to no avail. So this is G2A's website, and you can see right here that a lot of these games are being sold at a cheaper price than normal, and that's because this is other people selling their keys or their digital purchases on this website at a lower cost, and that's sort of the whole business of G2A, except a lot of developers just don't approve of the way G2A is so lax with security measures that results in costing devs time and money. Now, back in July 2019, G2A was so confident that there are no fraudulent purchases, or that if there are, they're so minimal that it's not worth looking into, that they vowed to pay developers 10 times the money proven to be lost on chargeback. So it reads right here, let's lay all the cards on the table. We will pay developers 10 times the money they lost on chargebacks after their illegally obtained keys were sold on G2A. The idea is simple. Developers just need to prove such a thing actually happened on their stores. To assure honesty and transparency, we will ask a reputable and independent auditing company to make an unbiased examination of both sides, the developer store and G2A marketplace. The cost of the first 3 audits is on us. Every next one will be split 50-50. You can feel the cockiness exuding from these first 2 paragraphs alone. This is basically them puffing up their chest and saying, oh yeah, you think they're fraudulent purchases in G2A? Prove it. In fact, if you lost money through chargebacks, we'll give you 10 times that if you can prove it. Go ahead, do it. Well, fast forward almost a year later to May 20th, 2020, and a developer has taken G2A up on their offer and have proven that stolen keys were in fact sold through G2A, and now G2A has paid 10 times the amount in chargebacks to that developer. And this is after months, years even, of them insisting that it's near impossible for fraudulent purchases to happen on G2A, them insisting that it's just, it's such a rare occurrence that it's not even worth looking into, them insisting that this is just developers making noise to draw attention, that they have ill intent by accusing G2A of selling fraudulent and stolen keys. But G2A has just been proven wrong, and G2A has kind of just played themselves, haven't they? Which brings us to the updated blog post that added the following segment to the original published back in July. So on May 20th, 2020, here's what G2A posted. Prague-based Whoop Software, the developers behind the popular game Factorio, became the only developer to take G2A up on this limited time offer to the gaming developer community in July 2019 after discovering that illegitimate keys to its construction and management simulation game Factorio had been sold online. So right here, G2A touts how Whoop Software was the only developer to take G2A up on this limited time offer, but that's likely because Whoop Software has seen great success with Factorio, and so they have the time and resources to be able to conduct such an investigation, whereas a lot of other indie developers have just given up on this situation and have decided to move on because it's just not worth it for them to spend time and resources on this when they have a game and a company to run. Ideally, a lot of these indie devs want their games pulled down from G2A so that they don't have to deal with chargebacks and customer service from fraudulent purchases, but G2A refuses to do so. But in comes Whoop Software, an indie game company that can actually kind of stand up to G2A and say, you know what, yeah, let's do this investigation. And hey, if we find the stolen keys, you better pay up that 10 times the money you promised. And that's kind of what's going on right now. And then there is something else I'd like to point out. When they say limited time offer, the whole, we'll pay developers 10 times the chargebacks, it was never mentioned before that this is a limited time offer. If you go through this blog post right here, they say flat out, we will pay developers with an S, anyone who can prove that such a thing happened in their stores, they will pay developers 10 times the money they lost on chargebacks. But the second they get called out on their BS, the second they get called on their bluff, suddenly it's a limited time offer, and suddenly developers can no longer redeem 10 times the amount in chargebacks from G2A. The frickin' cowards. G2A's blog post continues. Woob reported to G2A a list of 321 keys that it believed had been sold online illegitimately. After assessing a number of independent auditing companies and finding none that would meet our agreed requirements. Okay, so let me stop this post right there. So in the original post, they said that they have a reputable and independent auditing company lined up to make an unbiased examination of both sides. But that is inconsistent with what they're saying here, where they say that after assessing a number of independent auditing companies, they couldn't find any that would meet their agreed requirements. It's an inconsistency that coincides with other inconsistencies, like suddenly claiming that this is a limited time offer when that was never the case prior to this May 2020 article, among other things. Anyway, after assessing a number of independent auditing companies and finding none that would meet our agreed requirements, Woob and G2A decided that G2A should proceed with an internal investigation. This investigation confirmed that 198 of Woob's keys had been sold via its marketplace between March 2016 to June 2016. It is assumed by both parties that the remaining 123 illegitimate keys were sold via other online marketplaces or other online stores. Per the terms of the pledge made in the blog post here, G2A has agreed to compensate Woob 10 times the value of any bank-initiated refund costs that Factorio paid in relation to each of the 198 illegitimate keys sold via its marketplace. Now, for those wondering exactly how much money G2A is paying to Woob Software, it reads right here, according to Eurogamer, per the terms of the offer, G2A will now pay Woob Software $39,600, which is 10 times the amount of the chargebacks. When we launched this offer, we wanted to send a clear message to the gaming community that fraud hurts all parties. As we spell out in this blog, fraud directly hurts individuals who buy illegitimate keys, it hurts gaming developers, and it ultimately hurts G2A because we are forced, as the transaction facilitator, to cover costs related to the sale. Boo frickin' who for G2A. Are you seriously playing the victim card here right now, G2A? As the facilitator of these fraudulent purchases, and after constantly claiming that for such a thing to happen, it would be near impossible, that developers are just raising a ruckus to draw attention to themselves. After spouting all this BS, you're now suddenly going to talk about how, well, we've been affected too. Well, guess what? This is your storefront. It is your responsibility to put in the proper security measures to ensure something like this doesn't happen. But you continue to kind of sidestep the issue rather than take indie developers seriously. This is on you. You don't get to play the victim card after ignoring this issue for so long, after your bluff was called and the indie developers were proven right. You get to fix this, and you get to compensate developers for any lost money, and you get to keep your promise of 10 times the money. You don't suddenly get to declare that this is a limited time offer when the going starts to get tough, when your bluff is called on. This is all a result of your own negligence. You brought this on yourself. Moving on, we wanted to amplify that message and capture people's attention, so pledged to compensate developers 10 times the value of any chargeback fees they incurred, despite the fact that we had nothing to do with the illegal acquisition of these keys. That doesn't matter. The fact remains that you enable the reselling of these illicitly obtained products, and that's on you because it's your storefront. It's your responsibility to ensure something like this isn't happening. If you're a shipping company and cocaine is being smuggled through your shipping endeavors, guess what? It doesn't matter whether you are involved in the creation and acquisition and shipping of the cocaine. It doesn't matter if you didn't know about it. The fact remains that your company is still liable, given that your negligence was what led to that happening. Your lax security is what led to that happening. And this goes doubly true when you are warned that something nefarious is occurring and you decided to flat out ignore that or downplay the issue. This is the same excuse that EA uses when addressing the illicit third-party websites that use FIFA as a foundation for illegal gambling. EA will say, well, we're not directly associated with those websites. We don't officially condone those websites. But guess what? Your game FIFA, because of the way it was designed, because you guys implemented gambling into that game, you've enabled a platform where such illicit third-party websites can rise and thrive. You guys are enabling that, even if not on an official capacity, and therefore you have a significant part to play in that. A big chunk of that responsibility does lie with you. And with G2A, it doesn't matter whether you guys were responsible for how the keys were illicitly obtained. The fact remains you guys still sold them to people. You guys are enabling the reselling of illicitly obtained keys, and that is 100% on you. And if you cannot take responsibility for this, or if you can't find a way to deal with this, then you shouldn't be in business, or at the very least, you should abide by indie developers' request to pull their games listing down from G2A. The blog post concludes with, "The gaming developer community has our solidarity and sympathies on this issue, and we want to continue building bridges. Nobody gives a rat's ass about your solidarity or your sympathies. Nobody wants it. All indie devs want is for you to fix this, to find a solution, and if you can't, take down these indie devs games listings from your website. If you can't ensure that fraudulent purchases won't continue to happen and continue to harm indie developers by wasting their time and resources." Moving on, with our main point being made about the seriousness of fraud in the industry. Oh, suddenly this issue is serious when before you wouldn't take this seriously. When before you would accuse indie devs of wanting attention by accusing you. All of a sudden, this is a serious issue. From now on, we will compensate developers the full value of any chargeback fees they incurred for any keys sold via G2A Marketplace if they're able to prove they were illegitimate. So once again, the burden is on the developers, despite them wanting nothing to do with G2A. When G2A is the one causing the troubles, they're not saying we'll do whatever we can to keep investigating this, to report any illicitly sold keys. No, they're saying, hey developers, prove it, and then we'll give you your money back. And I'll remind you once again that G2A has recanted their vow to pay developers 10 times the money they lost on chargebacks after their illegally obtained keys were sold on G2A. Now they're just paying the full value of any chargeback fees. And while that's better than nothing, the fact remains that it's up to developers to investigate. The burden's still on them. And for a lot of these indie devs, it's not worth the trouble. They just want their games taken down from G2A, given that G2A is not willing to go the extra mile to prevent this stuff. With that out of the way, I'd like to do a deeper dive into the original post. I've already talked about these two paragraphs. Now, I'd like to point out that they said that they'd have to split the cost 50-50 with the developers if they were to conduct an audit. The first 3 would be on them, and then every one after that would be a 50-50 split. There is no justification for putting any monetary burden on the developers when it is solely G2A's fault that they're enabling the reselling of illicitly obtained keys. Like, the whole 50-50 split shouldn't be happening. 100% of the burden should be on G2A, given they're the ones who are ultimately responsible for the activity that goes on in their own storefront. Scrolling down, we have a too long didn't read version of this original post, and I'd like to highlight a few of these bullet points, starting with G2A's business model is the same as any other big global marketplaces like Amazon or eBay, with all its ups and downs. Well, guess what? Indie developers are not complaining about Amazon or eBay. They clearly have better security measures, and not to mention that G2A is very much a platform where specifically digital video games are sold, and that's why it attracts more gamers to this particular website and fraudulent sellers of digital game keys, because this is a video game dedicated website. And just because other companies might have similar issues doesn't absolve you of facing similar problems and not doing anything about it or doing very little about it. It doesn't justify the fact that you are ultimately harming other developers and that you're putting the burden of investigation on them rather than you doing your due diligence. Next up, out of all marketplaces, G2A offers the best benefits for copyright owners, G2A Direct. Nobody else gives developers a percentage cut of all sales on their games sold by someone else. But many indie developers will agree that the harm that G2A does far outweighs whatever small percentage cut they might get from games sold on G2A. The issues outweigh the benefits. And so that's why ultimately indie devs would prefer having to not deal with G2A at all, to not have to be involved with G2A in any way, shape, or form. Next bullet point, if any developer suspects there are keys on the marketplace that shouldn't be there, there's a quick and easy way to report it. All it takes is to contact us. If any key was illegally obtained, we'll remove it, block the seller, and provide their personal data to the proper authorities. First of all, from what I generally hear, it takes a while for G2A to get back to indie developers who are reporting on potential stolen keys or illicitly sold digital games. Secondly, you can see how long it took for G2A and Whoop Software to finally confirm that stolen keys were in fact sold through G2A and for G2A to finally compensate the Factorio developer. What G2A needs are preventative measures, not measures of investigation after the fact, after the illicit activity has taken place. And G2A just hasn't, again, gone that extra mile to really kind of lock things down for G2A and make sure it's a safe place to sell games. And then finally, this is rich, especially when looking back at this retroactively. We are and always were open for discussion, but a real one, not empty accusations and catchy slogans. Well, those accusations turned out to be not so empty now, did they? Now that it's been confirmed that stolen keys were in fact sold through G2A and you are forced to compensate Whoop Software. Who looks like a fucking idiot now? And that's another thing about G2A. They've always taken this aggressive, hostile stance towards anyone accusing them of anything and continue to claim that these are empty accusations and catchy slogans that, again, developers just want attention when there was a reality to this situation when multiple indie development sources expressed their concerns and their woes surrounding G2A. It wasn't just one individual trying to defame G2A. A bunch of indie devs have been saying the same thing. G2A is harmful to us. Now, moving past this bullet list, scrolling further down, you'll find G2A engaging with Mike Rose, who is an indie developer who called G2A out on Twitter, and his tweets gained a lot of traction. And in regards to accusations about his game being sold illicitly on G2A, G2A said, "We checked out of curiosity how many Descenders keys, Descenders being the name of his game, since its release in May came to G2A Marketplace. The number is 5, not 5,000, not 500, just 5. And their main point being that G2A has no significant impact on No More Robots business, basically saying that sales of his game on G2A are so low that it is just a blip on the radar. It is barely worth looking into. Except if you actually look at this screenshot, you'll find some anomalies, like the fact that one individual sold 102 keys, one individual sold 67 keys, and one individual sold 23 keys, and this was back in August 2018, April 2018, and May 2018. This was something that Mike Rose called out, saying that this likely suggests that one individual fraudulently bought these keys en masse with a stolen credit card or whatever, and then sold them via G2A, resold them here, where this stuff isn't really secured or tracked all that much, where it's very easy to sell fraudulently obtained keys. The main excuse that G2A has here is that, well, your game doesn't sell all that much on our website, so who cares? But that's an awful attitude to have. Even if one copy is sold illicitly through your website, you should be taking that issue seriously, because that one illicit copy affects the customer, there is a customer that is negatively affected by this, and the developer is affected by this as well, alongside their reputation. Moving on, as we scroll down, you'll find that G2A continues to antagonize anyone accusing them, saying stuff like, quote, "In the last few days, we encountered numerous tweets, videos, and articles saying more or less that G2A is terrible. They don't care where the keys sold on their platform come from." That's not a very informed opinion, isn't it now? With G2A now having flat out admitted that stolen keys were in fact sold through their storefront, is it still a not very informed opinion, G2A? The post then proceeds to answer the question, if G2A is so good and fair, why are developers saying it's better to pirate their games instead of buying them on G2A? The response that G2A provided is, once again, antagonistic. They flat out suggest developers have ill intent by making accusations stating, "We want to believe in the developers' clean motives, but we also know that if there was a problem, the most obvious reaction to that would be trying to fix it. If you had a reason to believe your keys were illegally obtained and ended up on G2A, what would you do to solve the issue? Write to G2A and solve the problem together? Go to Twitter and write, 'Fuck G2A.' Obviously point A, right? Well, not exactly. The developers who posted tweets over this past week haven't tried to solve the problem together with G2A. That's why we can assume the reason they wrote those posts was to gain media attention." Wow. Unfortunately for G2A, they were incredibly successful. Their tweets caused an avalanche of articles. Like, fuck off. Solve the problem together with G2A? You guys are causing these indie devs a host of problems, and you're asking them to, hey, why don't we just work together to make my storefront work? And indie developers have already stated what they want out of G2A. Either put in security measures that actually work, preventative measures, or take down their games from your storefront, take down their games listing so that stuff like this doesn't keep happening and continue to burden developers by having them waste time and money on customer service and chargebacks. But that's just something G2A refuses to do because the solution to this situation has to be on their terms, not the developers. And then they tout right here how there was an incident with Microsoft and they dealt with it. Well, Microsoft is a major publisher, and no doubt they will rain down hell on you if you fuck up their potential sales. So, of course, you responded to them quickly. And not to mention, Microsoft has the money and resources to stave off a handful of stolen keys sold via G2A, whereas a lot of other indie developers, again, don't have the time and resources to set aside for this G2A issue. And then scrolling down here, this whole segment is dedicated to G2A flaunting how unlikely it is that fraudulent sales will occur through G2A. We obviously know how ridiculous this all looks now, given the confirmation that stolen keys were in fact sold through G2A. This is also a hilarious quote in retrospect. "We want to finally stop the accusations we have been getting from some devs. The alleged frauds didn't happen in our ecosystem, but on their own stores." Last but not least, G2A highlights in big bold letters, such credit card fraud might be nearly impossible. Is it now, Is it now? Plenty of other news outlets are also covering this, and they're not particularly amused at G2A's response. So, Eurogamer's headline, for example, reads, "G2A admits it sold stolen game keys, offers no plan for change, no additional security measures." And it is mentioned right here, there is no suggestion of reopening this offer to other developers for an investigation into other game keys. There is no apology of any kind. Meaning all G2A has done is flaunt how they kept their vow of that whole 10 times the chargebacks offer, and only once, and suddenly made this a limited offer. And that's about it. They're not really laying out any plans for how they plan to stop these fraudulent sales. They're not leaving that 10 times the chargebacks offer open to anyone else. They offer no apology of any kind, no solution. They just kind of wanted to show off how, look, we kept our promise the one time. News outlet Polygon also covered this, and here's a statement that G2A provided to them. stating, "We would be the first to admit that in our formative years as a company, we took too long to recognize that a small number of individuals were abusing our marketplace. However, the criticism we received was the wake-up call we needed. Oh, now it's this wake-up call, and now it's no longer just fake accusations for attention as they previously claimed. And over the last years, we have been totally committed to tackling any incidents of fraud on our site. Today, we use some of the most sophisticated proprietary anti-fraud AI technology of any online marketplace for digital products." That just sounds like a whole lot of fluff. You're not offering any real solution, any real assurance. This is a claim anyone can make, but after it's been proven that illicit activity has taken place in your storefront, you have to prove more tangibly that you have in fact taken steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. G2A hasn't done that. To close this video off, I'd like to show you guys some articles and tweets that are worth looking at. I'll also source them in the description below. These stretch years back and they highlight just how shady this gray market is. So here's an article from February 2015. The headline reads, "The Truth Behind Those Mysteriously Cheap Gray Market Game Codes." This is a Polygon article that I think is worth checking out that kind of highlights some of the more nefarious aspects of this marketplace, that kind of details how all of this works. Fast forwarding to June 20th, 2016, here's another Polygon article whose headline reads, "Indie Dev Says Gray Market Key Seller Cost Them $450,000 in Sales," referring to an indie dev called TinyBuild that has been in a dispute with G2A for some time now. So 2 days later, on June 22nd, there was a lot of back and forth between G2A and TinyBuild. And even fast forwarding to March 1st, 2017, TinyBuild sparked up some contention with G2A during a GDC panel because TinyBuild was sick and tired of the damage that G2A was doing to them, or at the very least, that was TinyBuild's accusation. Later that month, on March 21st, 2017, Polygon conducted a survey about G2A that developers participated in, and there is talk here of how some developers feel like they have no choice but to participate in the G2A Direct program because they tried unsuccessfully to get their games unlisted from the platform. That's their ideal solution to prevent extra damage, extra wasted time and resources, but G2A wouldn't abide by that, so they had no choice but to work with G2A, even though they want no association with G2A. Fast forwarding to the following month, on April 20th, 2017, G2A claimed during a Reboot Develop Q&A session that, quote, "We're not a gray marketplace. People just don't understand our business. Except gray market, by definition, refer to the trade of a commodity through distribution channels that are not authorized by the original manufacturer or trademark proprietor. Gray market products are products traded outside the authorized manufacturer's channel," which is exactly the kind of market that G2A is. So I don't know what kind of delusion makes G2A think that they're not a gray market. And then a big bombshell really dropped on July of 2019 when multiple developers called on players to pirate their games rather than buy from G2A. And these were relayed through a number of tweets. Here's Mike Rose, who talked about how when somebody types the name of his game in Google, the first thing that pops up are links to G2A rather than the storefront that Mike Rose would prefer that the game be sold in. And then on top of that, he adds that, please, if you're going to buy a game from G2A, just pirate it instead. Genuinely, devs don't see a penny either way, so we'd much rather G2A didn't see money either. And then right here, Rage Squid added, please torrent our games instead of buying them on G2A. Rami Ismail said, if you can't afford or don't want to buy our games full price, please pirate them rather than buying them from a key reseller. These sites cost us so much potential dev time in customer service, investigating fake key requests, figuring out credit card chargebacks, and more. I'm saying if you want to get it without paying me money, please don't cost me my time. How bad does a storefront have to be for a developer to genuinely encourage piracy? And this finally brings us right back to July 5th, 2019, when G2A proposed this vow of paying 10 times the money lost on chargebacks to any developers who can prove that illicit activity took place. saying that we want to finally stop the accusations, and also offering independent audits of its catalog, while one developer was petitioning the company to stop selling some game keys altogether. A few days later, on July 8th, 2019, G2A would face another controversy after one of their employees tried to pay the press for favorable coverage. This is no joke. You can actually see the emails sent to news outlets right here. Thomas Faust posted them. You can see right here that the email reads, "I'm contacting you because I think your website matches our interests perfectly, and we would like to find out more about publishing and advertising opportunities that you can offer. At the moment, we are trying to improve our brand awareness and public image, especially among the indie and smaller game developers. Unfortunately, the majority of public does not understand either our business model or how we try to make sure our customers can safely purchase digital products. We want to make sure people understand we do everything we can to support gaming community and that we introduce every possible method to assure every side is satisfied." Things get even more incriminating right here. We have written an unbiased article about how selling stolen keys on gaming marketplaces is pretty much impossible, and we want to publish it on your website without being marked as sponsored or marked as associated with G2A. Pretty sure that's illegal. It is a transparent and just review of the problem of the stolen keys reselling. Below, I attach an excerpt of the article. If you want the full article, just let me know. Right after touting how they don't want to disclose the fact that this is a sponsored article and that there is an association with G2A, they have the audacity to say that this is a transparent and just and unbiased review. Oh, wow. This is comedy gold. That same day, G2A tried to immediately backpedal by saying these emails were sent by our employee without authorization, for which we apologize to some indie games and the 9 other media outlets he sent this proposal to. He will face strict consequences, as this is absolutely unacceptable. Yeah. G2A, okay. Suffice to say that nobody's buying it. After more backlash, on July 12th, 2019, G2A proposed a key blocking tool for developers, except that still involves developers having to do work on their end. It still involves developers being burdened, so it's not an ideal solution. And this was something that Mike Bethel relayed via this tweet that reads, "I don't work for you. It's your job to protect the customers you sell unchecked keys to, not mine. I don't endorse or work with gray markets or folks that secretly pay for positive press. Bot-farmed gift exploitation is the issue, not keys, and you know this, obviously." Same thing was highlighted by Mike Rose here, who highlighted that the actual problem of sellers using dodgy Steam gift links is what's being completely ignored by G2A. And he added right here, "So while the key blocking initiative is a nice gesture and if implemented may actually be useful, it's just yet another example of G2A publicly making some positive sounding noise to glaze over the fact that they're not actually addressing the issue at all. It's a classic G2A move." Last but not least, here we have an article from July 15th, 2019 from Games Industry, in which they detail how Whoop Software, the developers of Factorio, take up G2A on their offer to pay back 10 times its chargeback fees. Studio has racked up $6,600 in chargebacks for Factorio, also encourages players to pirate their game rather than buy via G2A. So this is where it all began. It was in July when Whoop Software said, you know what, yes, let's call their bluff. Let's test their vow of paying 10 times the chargebacks. And that leads us to today when Whoop Software managed to prove, alongside with G2A, that stolen keys were sold, and they got a restitution fee of $39,000 some dollars. And they noted that G2A is not exactly prompt in terms of dealing with requests, so that's a big part of why developers aren't keen on kind of working it out with G2A as G2A proposes, because it takes a while for them to respond and to engage in any sort of tangible action. So yeah, that's a very brief summary of G2A's shady history leading up to May 20th, 2020's blog post update. As you can see, G2A doesn't care about anyone but itself. They'll say anything to shift blame, to not take responsibility, to not take tangible action. And look, I'm all for the idea of a storefront where people can resell the products that they already own, but if that storefront can't enact the proper security measures to ensure that illicit activity, that fraudulent sales don't take place, then the company is in no position to be running a storefront. If G2A can't deal with this issue, they should not exist, period. The thing about G2A is that they're not just incapable of dealing with this issue, they're also unwilling to. Just putting the burden on the developers, even though they're the problem causer. And it's just, that's bad business. It's shady business. Alright, I've said all there is to say on this matter. I know this was a longer video than usual, but I really wanted to be thorough with this one because G2A doesn't deserve an inkling of leeway when it comes to how they've dealt with all of this. But that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on all of this, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.